Welcome, my friends, to another YouTube version of the BJJ Brick podcast. I hope you enjoy the show, and if you do, please subscribe to the channel. So here we go.
Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to episode 216 of the BJJ Brick podcast. My name is Byron. I'm here with my buddy Gary. Gary, this is going to be a great episode. We have Nick Unander on the show this week.
Yeah, definitely. Can't wait to have Nick on the show. Nick is actually a friend and former training partner of Joe, so Joe got us in touch with Nick, and so we have an awesome show with Nick on it today.
Yep, this is Joe does the interview. Super happy about this. This was a lot of fun. How this worked out was I called Joe and then also called Nick and was kind of like the middleman. I told Joe, I was like, hey, I might jump in there sometimes, but you take the bull by the horns, and he freaking did a great job with the whole interview. And basically, I just contributed like a joke at the end that was kind of off color.
It was probably a bad joke, too.
It was not that good of a joke.
Yeah.
But wait for that. It's at the end. But really, I was, I didn't know if it would be like a 3-person conversation or whatever. I said, Joe, interview him. If you get stuck or need a little bit of help, I'll jump in there and do it. And Joe just took off, and I more or less stayed out of the way. And Joe did an awesome job, and so did Nick. So this is going to be a great episode.
Yeah, Joe's a stud anyhow, and he knows Nick. So, the interview is just going to be incredible. So do not miss it. Stay tuned. Well, we also had a special thing happen with one of our listeners this week. I'd like to congratulate Cheese the dog. Cheese is one of our listeners, and Cheese is a dog, actually Byron's dog, who lost a leg earlier this year. But Cheese just finished running in a 5K. So that's incredible. It's just incredible. You're missing a leg. You don't even let it bother you. You just go on and do whatever you can do. I mean, that would be an awesome life lesson, that we talk about on jiu-jitsu. Don't let anything hold you back. But Byron does have another life lesson we'll be getting to here in a second. Also, check out Byron's audiobook, 6 Games for BJJ. It's only $5.99, and it's definitely going to help you get out of a rut, any of your valleys that you're going to have in BJJ. A lot of times you do get stuck. You feel like you're not progressing. You're not having as much fun. And boy, what is fun? Playing a game is fun. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to get you out of what you normally do. You're going to find different ways to do stuff, different types of games. And I know Joe was on here a couple weeks ago and was talking about, he's been doing, passing and everything to his bad side. That's one of the games. And it's, a lot of times your partner doesn't even know you're doing it, but you just start working your bad side, passing that way, putting an arm bar up from that side, doing an omoplata from that side. And, we all have a side that we're not as good at. And basically it's going to make us better, at that side. It's going to change everything up and, just make the game a little bit refreshing. It's also going to help your training partner. You think about your training partner is used to framing on one side to stop the pass, and next thing you know, you're coming to the other side. So your training partner is going to, have everything changed up a little bit also. So definitely check it out. We have a link to it on the show notes. It's called 6 Games for BJJ.
Yep, if you're in a rut, it'll get you out of that rut. It's like putting bigger, beefier tires on your vehicle. You'll get out of the rut.
Yeah, like if you look at Byron's Ford Pinto, you ought to see the big tires he has on that thing. He totally believes in big tires.
I try not to get in the rut, Gary, and I just avoid the rut. The rut is like, or the 6 games is like adding the bumpers to the thing. That's not a very good analogy because it makes you actually play worse. That's not a good analogy. The games just make you experiment with your own game. And bumpers and bowling would not make you experiment with your own game. They'd make you develop bad habits.
Yeah. But I guess it could be like bumpers and bowling. We could put our hands, tie our hands behind our back and try grappling that way.
There you go. Man.
Yeah. So there.
That's just another one of Gary's games that will be really tricky to pull off or to get any benefit out of.
Well, I was joking about.
You won't get Kimura.
Yeah, I was joking about the game of horse and pig. How I was saying the other day, it's like we could play horse, but you wouldn't let me put it in the games there. But actually, with my training partners, I told them we're going to play horse, where whatever, whoever we start grappling, whoever taps each other first, the next guy now has 3 minutes to tap the other guy out with that same move, or they get a letter. So we did actually play that last week.
Well, actually, Gary said he wanted to play horse. Fine, whatever. And next thing I know, I kind of turtle up a little bit. He goes to get like his hooks in from my turtle position, and like you're like you're a pony, Byron. I'm like, Gary, what the world? And then he takes his fingers and he puts them in my mouth like it's like one of those things they put in the horse's mouth. I don't even know what that is. Bridle. And he starts like telling me to go. And man, I was defenseless. And so if Gary wants to play horse, it's a trick. Do not do it.
Don't fall for it.
It gets bad really quick.
Yep.
No, but Gary, you mentioned the off the mat lesson that we could bring onto the mat. And we could have used my dog. I think we've talked about my dog before. But this time, I just got back literally 45 minutes ago from my nephew's birthday party. And I've got quite a few nibblings, nieces and nephews. And, we have a birthday party every couple of months. And it was it's a lot of fun. Everybody gets together. It's a big family, a big party. But it reminded me a little bit about jiu-jitsu. Like, this is about his birthday. So there's presents, there's cake. It's, yay, you turned 8, that excitement. And then after that 10-minute or 15-minute thing, he's back to playing with the kids like nothing happened. And that's kind of like getting a belt in jiu-jitsu. You got your blue belt. Yay, take some pictures, some hugs, some handshakes, congratulations. You're back on the mat, you're a regular person, just basically the same you were before you ate that birthday cake or before you got your belt. You're just rolling, you're just doing your thing. Same thing if you go win a tournament. The next day, people will congratulate you and say you did a good job and ask how it went, sure. But minutes later, you're the same person before you're just welcome back in the group. And that's, you shouldn't dwell on those things or really think about, I got my belt, and like that be the highlight of the rest of the year. It should be like a cool, it is a big accomplishment, but you got more to do. No matter what belt it is, they just tie it around your waist, and it's just not it could be a landmark, but it shouldn't be a stopping point or a indefinite amount of attention. Like the kid got, his little 15 minutes of fame, and everybody's looking at him and singing to him and all that sort of thing, giving him presents. After that, he's out there wrestling with the other kids and playing Nerf guns and that sort of thing, and he's just an equal again. And I think that in jiu-jitsu, we all think that we're a little bit more important than we are sometimes, especially when you get that belt. But soon, very soon, you melt back into the group and you're just rolling again.
Except, Byron, when you get that blue belt versus eating the cake and open the presents, everybody, then you have a target on your back. Everybody's coming at you, hungry. Where, after you eat that cake, nobody's coming at you hungry.
Well,
they just want to hang out with you and play games.
If you get the last piece of cake, you're walking around, and there's still a lot of people left because they didn't make a very big cake, and a lot of them are real hungry because the food wasn't that good anyway. You got a target on your back, or at least on your plate.
That actually happened to me at work the other day. We had a lunch catered in, and, there was dessert and, just enough desserts for everybody. But I didn't know that, and I ended up with 3 desserts. And I heard a little bit later that a couple of people didn't get desserts, and they were mad. But I never did tell anybody that I had extra desserts. I blamed somebody else. But I really did feel bad. I didn't realize there was only enough dessert so everybody could get one.
You felt bad, and you also felt full. So
I felt full.
That was good too.
Yep. But yeah, dessert is good.
That's funny. Way to go, Gary. That seems like something I would do when I realized,
definitely.
There was only enough for everybody to have one. I'm sorry, guys.
Yep. I could see you doing it. But, you're lucky you weren't there. You're lucky we don't work together, because you would have got blamed for the desserts, and I guarantee I could have talked everybody into believing that you did it.
Yeah.
Yep. But what we have for the quote of the week this week is from the reason I'm laughing, and we're not going to cut this out,
okay,
because Byron sends me a outline of what we're doing, and it's normal, as you guys can probably tell. I don't ever read it beforehand, so I'm getting ready to say the quote, and I was looking to see who it's from. And it's from I.P. Which is like probably somebody's name, how intelligent people have names like that, not like Byron and Gary, but it's I.P. Freely. So Byron was actually trying to catch me, but which he has done numerous times. But this time I actually didn't fall for it. So sooner or later I learn. It takes me a little while, but I'm throwing the gauntlet out here to Byron to try to catch me some more. So good job, Byron, but I'm a little bit wiser this week.
It's like a good try, little brother.
Yep.
Next time, do a little bit better than that. It's like,
Yep.
I didn't stand a chance on that one, especially when you read the name first. I thought maybe you'd read the quote and then say who it's from and just kind of keep going smoothly, and got busted. This quote is from Arthur Helps,
a.k.a. IP Freely. Which would be great, because I've been taking my prostate medicine. But the quote is, "Wise sayings often fall on barren ground, but a kind word is never thrown away." And I mean, that's an awesome quote there. Basically, if you say something, highly intelligent and pertinent, often no one cares, and probably nobody can understand it because it's highly intelligent. But if you say something nice to somebody, they'll remember it forever. And I think about, I've heard some stuff about coaching. For every negative you say 3 or 4 positive things, and just being nice to people. It's a way to get people to open up to you. Byron rarely says something nice to me, but when he does, it's something I'm not used to. It's something I'll remember forever. So I think a lot of people can think about, when their coach said something really nice to them, especially the first time, that they'll remember it. Just stuff like that. I'm thinking about, I remember when my very first coach, told me that I was getting better and he was going to start using me. He told me, he pulled me aside, said I was starting to get better, and he told me he was going to start using me when he demonstrates some stuff, because now I'm starting to learn. And I just remember him telling me that, and then, just feeling so privileged that, he picked me to demonstrate moves on. And I mean, here I am, 15 years later, and it's something that I still remember that.
Yeah, I'm still, the idea of getting a compliment or saying something like a kind word versus something that is really smart and helpful, they're both good, but I'm still running on a compliment. Somebody in 2002 said I had a nice smile. I'm still running on that high. Like, compliments last me a long time. You really latch onto those things. You don't hear them very often all the time, but especially from people who don't have anything to gain. They're just being friendly. But I think in Jiu-Jitsu, we're trying to help each other, so we're happy to do this technique or do it this way, show those details, or maybe just that really big thing that they need to hear a lot of times. A lot of times, like the quote says, that could fall on barren ground. That could fall on nothing. Like, they don't pick it up, they don't run with it. But if you say something that's complimentary, it can go a long way. It can go towards helping that person. Just like if I'm trying to pass Gary's guard, 3 days later, I say, "Hey, Gary, man, your guard is really turned up. I got nothing for this. You're really doing great with it. Keep working on that." Suddenly, Gary, for the next whoever knows how long, maybe a minute or maybe 3 months, or maybe he's like me and he can coast on a compliment for years. He's walking around thinking his guard is really good. I want to keep working on that. I want to keep developing this. I have a good guard, and those sort of things are going on in his head. And I just think that is true. Anytime I get an unexpected compliment, it just kind of makes your day a little bit, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well said, Byron. You are very intelligent.
Oh, man. Gary, I don't know if you realize that, but you're such a smart guy that you kind of just did what the quote was saying to do. And, man, I'm so happy right now. Way to go, Gary.
Oh, dang, I didn't even think about that. That's awesome. Just like you, Byron. You're awesome.
Thanks, Gary. And then and one of the things that makes me awesome is that I do pee freely.
There you go. We don't really need to know that, though, Byron.
Oh, Gary has dodged that one with the fake quote name. If you have a name that you want me to try to throw at Gary to see if he could say it and not understand that it's a joke, send it to me at bjjbrick@gmail.com. That'll bypass Gary's whole system of observation, and I'll try to slide it onto the podcast.
Ooh. Or you can just send it to a message on our Facebook page, and I probably still won't read it either.
He might see it there, though. Not quite as sneaky. If that happens, I'll wait a week and then put it on the next one.
And I'll forget about it by then.
All right. Well, here comes the interview. It's by our friend Joe. He was on the show last week. Definitely was a blast having him on the show. We learned a little bit about Joe and a lot about Nick during this interview. So here we go. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
He reached the top of Everest by sweeping it and taking Mount. This is also how the Mount position got its name. He had to drop his sponsorship with Beats headphones because they would not fit over his cauliflower ears. Their stock dropped 30% that day. He wore his unwashed gi to a blind date. You're damn right he got a second date.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
Hey, BJJ Brick listeners, this is Joe Thomas. I'll be conducting this week's interview with my friend and former professor Nick Unander. We've also got Byron on the line. Nick, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Joe. Good to talk to you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks for being here. Byron, how are you doing today?
Doing really good. Had a little short conversation with Nick here. It's going to be a great interview. He's already made us laugh a couple of times, and it sounds like he's leading an interesting life in jiu-jitsu.
Thanks, Byron, for having me also. As I said, it's an honor to be on here. I'm sitting in the Greek part of Cyprus in the Mediterranean Sea, sipping some coconut water, as any good BJJ practitioner should do to hydrate. And ready to answer your questions.
Did you get your daily dose of acai?
You know, we don't have a good source of acai over here yet, but I'm sure it will come because jiu-jitsu is definitely taking off across Greece and Eastern Europe. I'm good friends with the guy that produces the show BJJ Eastern Europe and Watch BJJ, Guillaume Honi,
Okay.
you pronounce his name. And he's got a huge following for Eastern Europe and basically does all the news around for that. And he's managed to do a great job at making Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu be more recognized in this area of the world.
Very, very good. Nick, at this point, I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. If you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started in martial arts and just kind of lay out your journey from there to where we are now. Take all the time you need.
Sure. Basically, I grew up in France, and I went to an American school there. And when I hadn't really lived in the United States as a young person, and when I graduated from school, I moved back to the States to go to university, where I went to University of New Hampshire in Durham. And as most college students in the beginning, it was, and especially me, because it was a totally different culture and a different way of living and stuff, I was starting to get involved in all the partying at college because I'd seen all these movies, like how people party at American colleges. And I found it necessary to find something to help me focus. And there happened to be a Korean master instructor of Tae Kwon Do who had just moved to the United States and opened a small dojo on the college campus at actually the college gym. And that's where I started my martial arts journey, let's say, in 1986. Yeah, 1986.
So 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been at it a while.
I've been at it a while, yeah. And I stayed with Tae Kwon Do until second degree black belt. And I competed a lot in Tae Kwon Do, and I loved it back then because it was before it was an Olympic sport, and it was more of a full contact type of scenario. When you went to a tournament, you actually got to kick people really hard, and you would also get kicked really hard. And so there was that risk factor involved, which I don't know, call me a masochist. I kind of enjoy the contact of the sport. So yeah, I started there and I got my second degree black belt in Tae Kwon Do. And when I graduated from university, I moved out to the West Coast, to California. And there I continued training Tae Kwon Do, and I also took up Kempo karate because it had more punches and I liked the closer contact that it gave. It was less kicks. But I always felt, I'll just kind of, long story short, I always felt like there was something missing in practicing just strictly striking arts. And I was really interested for a while in judo and wanted to find a place to train judo. But as I was out of college and I was working and all that sort of thing, it was difficult to find a place to train. And I actually stumbled upon Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on a business trip I was on to Brazil for an import-export company I was working for. And I was down in Rio for 2 weeks, and I was just looking for a gym to train. And I happened upon the Carlson Gracie gym in Rio de Janeiro. And that's where I walked through the door, and my entire perspective of martial arts changed when these little Brazilian guys were kicking my ass on the mat, basically. And I earned a whole new respect for, what you really need to know in order to defend yourself.
How was your introduction to that, Nick? Did you just walk in and they said, "Hey, let's roll," or did you do a private lesson?
I went in there, and I mean, I'm not going to lie. I thought I was a pretty tough guy because I had a second-degree black belt in Tae Kwon Do and a second-degree black belt in karate, and I thought I could hold my own. And as with a lot of people, I think that train striking arts that stumble upon Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and go in, and suddenly their whole perspective of the world changes. And that's how it happened. I just, I got excuse my French, I got my ass handed to me, and for an hour and a half by a bunch of really tough guys, and it kind of got me thinking. And I was only down in Brazil for 2 weeks at that time, and I trained pretty much every day I was there. I tried to hit that gym, and kind of got me thinking when I got on my flight to go back to the United States to look for a place where I could also continue my training there. And at the time I was living in Vermont, and I had an office in Montreal, Canada. And there was one of the Carlson Gracie black belts teaching in Burlington, Vermont, which is Julio Fernandez. And he is I believe he's a 6th or 7th degree black belt now. Directly under Carlson Gracie, and he also had one student named Cleve Worthington who lived in the town where I lived, and he was only 5 minutes away from me. So I was training with Cleve 3 days a week, and then I was training with Julio about 3 or 4 days a week, as much as I could hit the gym.
Man,
Sorry, go ahead.
You didn't ease into it at all, did you?
No, I went full bore, man. I dove right in. As soon as I woke up after the first day that I trained jiu-jitsu in Brazil, when I woke up in the hotel and my whole body was sore, I felt like I had been put through a meat grinder, basically. I could not wait to get back and learn this cool thing called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And honestly, I had no idea what it was before I started. I really didn't, and it was a total eye-opener. And ever since then, I don't think there's been, the only time I haven't trained is when I've been too sick to get to the gym since that time, since white belt. I've been pretty consistent, So, yeah. And then, let's see, I was training with Julio in Vermont, and I asked him because I was moving to the West Coast, and this was before I moved to Astoria, where I met you, Joe.
Yep.
And I asked Julio, I had just received my purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I said, look, I'm moving out to the West Coast, and I would really like to open a school and start teaching there if it's okay with you. And Julio gave me his blessing, and he said, man, the one thing about Jiu-Jitsu is it'll never make you rich, but it'll make you happy. And I think, to this day, he was absolutely right in that statement. because it didn't make me rich, but I am happy. Okay. But he also said it's a tough business. It's a tough business because every guy that comes in the gym at that, especially back then, was, wanting to beat you basically, or test you, let's say, which isn't so much the case today, I don't think. But yeah.
Nick, when you were in Vermont, and if this is like Fight Club and you can't talk about it, or if I'm misremembering, that's fine. But didn't you do some amateur MMA or underground challenge matches when you were there?
Yeah, I did. Me and my friends, when we were blue belt, there was an organization out of Rhode Island that was doing these kind of just, I'm sure they were illegal. They were called pound cage NHB, no holds barred. And basically anybody off the street would come in and you won $500 if you won the fight. And there was just a bunch of drinking and gambling and different things going on. And me and my friends would go down probably every time they would have a fight, which was usually once every 3 months.
So what was the reaction of your opponents? I imagine you were doing things that a lot of them hadn't really seen before.
Yeah, no, my strategy was to make them think I was a striker, and I would go in with my Tae Kwon Do style first. And then as soon as we would clinch up, I would just take it to the ground, and normally it would end in a rear naked choke. I don't want to lie. Rear naked choke was a go-to. And most of the guys were, either schoolyard bullies or, there were very few that were trained fighters. Some karate guys, some stuff like that. But yeah, it wasn't really, there wasn't a huge challenge, but it was fun to go,
Yeah. So once you had the back, it was all over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Back then, nobody knew Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Even at Julio's school, and Julio was one of the top instructors in the States. It was a very small school. We were like in a garage, and there were probably 20 or 30 guys training there. And it was completely unknown,
Right.
Still, because it was back when Royce was had just started the UFC, UFC 1 in that time. So yeah, most people didn't even know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was. Not like today, where especially in the States, it's pretty popular now, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty big. Okay, so you got to Astoria. Tell me a little bit about running a small school in a small fishing village on the West Coast.
It was the same situation when I moved to Astoria because no one really knew what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was there. There was one guy at the community college, Clatsop Community College, that was a state trooper, and he had gone to a few seminars, and he was teaching what he called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. But he ended up, I went there to see him, actually, and I watched his class, and it just didn't look like he was really qualified to be teaching what he would call Gracie Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think he had a ninjutsu background or something like that. And I waited until after class, and I asked him if he wanted to roll. And I didn't do it disrespectfully. I just said, hey, man, you want to roll because you're a teacher. And he didn't want to roll with me. And right away, kind of red lights came up. And I was like, why don't you want to roll with me? Everybody wants to roll. And anyway, so then at that time, were you at the school? You were at the school that I had in that building, right? Underneath?
In the basement, that's right.
Yeah, in the basement. And that building, I helped the guy who owned the building, I helped him renovate for 1 year free rent. So that whole area we were training in, I built from nothing. It was just a dungeon. I honestly, I didn't know very much about building, so I had to ask a lot of people a lot of advice about how to put up sheetrock and how to build a bathroom and a shower. And you remember kind of how it was. It was kind of thrown together.
Yeah, we had to walk outside and through the parking lot and then through the other underground storage to get to the bathroom, mm-hmm. if I remember correct.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and once I started there, many of the people that were up, because the people that were training with the state trooper, they knew kind of what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was and were really looking for, authentic training. And they ended up coming and checking out my facility when I started. And many of them came from there, actually, in the very beginning.
Nice.
So, yeah. And at that time, I was teaching as a purple belt, and I was kind of gung-ho, you know. If I think back now and I were to see myself, I would think I wasn't really qualified to be teaching at that time. But the only thing that made it was that I had a passion for the art. You know, I really, really loved it, and I wanted to pass it on to people and, you know, continue learning. And, you know, and because Marcelo Alonso was in Seattle, I was close enough to that to kind of start to get a relationship with him. And my being with Julio, I was representing, in the beginning, I was representing BJJ Revolution team with Julio, which was also a Carlson Gracie team. But because Julio was on the East Coast, there were some logistics problems that occurred, and I ended up basically affiliating with Marcelo in Seattle because he was closer and could give me more support on a regular basis as far as my learning and continuing my jiu-jitsu journey was concerned. And I ended up getting my black belt under him. So,
yeah, this was back in the days before the internet was developed like it is today. You couldn't just go on YouTube or connect with your resources by Facebook. So things were definitely different.
Yeah, there was no way to get any techniques. Nowadays, you can get every single technique you want on YouTube. But back when I started, we were lucky if we got a newspaper that had some photos that were like a series of moves on a newspaper picture, and you had to kind of decipher what's he doing, you know, and we'd all get together and look at it and say, let's figure out this move. I mean, the X guard didn't exist. The De La Riva guard didn't exist. You know, it was just, it was really, really basic stuff, you know. Pass the guard, get position, look for submission. You know, that was the name of the game.
That's the way I still play jiu-jitsu, Nick.
I do too, but I like to play around with the new stuff. You know? I've even been seen doing birambolos. Don't tell anybody. Oh, I already did.
Nice.
So yeah, and then after time went on, and what happened is the school I was at got flooded. The one I built got completely flooded, and all the mats were floating around in the school. And I was having class that night because we had a huge storm, and the Columbia River came up, and the water level came up, and I went in the gym and I just saw all my mats, you know, and I had bought the zebra mats, really nice mats, were floating around in this river water, you know. And so my students came, and we packed everything in a van and their trucks and quickly drove it over to a guy I knew who had a bunch of warehouses in an industrial park. And he let me use one of his units to put the mats in while they dried off, and also then to put them down and do some training in one of the units. So my school ended up in one storage unit in this industrial park. And that was kind of an interesting move. And then eventually I built a big gym in that same industrial park and had a fitness center and had the school located there. So, yeah.
So how long did you stay in Astoria, and then how did you end up making the transition to where'd you go, the Mediterranean next?
Yeah, well, what happened was I was in Astoria for about 10 years, and I had some really great students, and they are amazing jiu-jitsu players to this day and became instructors like yourself. But also the Adamson brothers in Seaside, Oregon, who were purple belts under me, ended up joining the Lovato team, which team is that? Rafael Lovato Jr.?
Yeah, he's up in Oklahoma.
Okay, yeah. They ended up joining his team and opening under him at purple belt, and they continued on to get their black belts and continued teaching and have a big school in Seaside now, and basically continued the jiu-jitsu after I left there, and are basically the main guys teaching in that area now. And what happened, it was 2010, and I basically made a life decision that I wanted a change in my life, and I packed up my things and I picked a spot that I thought would be really nice to live, because it rains a lot. You remember it rains a lot in Astoria? You know,
Boy, do I.
wanted to move somewhere that was more sunny, and I also missed Europe, having grown up in Europe. And I basically took a backpack. I took my gi. I took a couple of pairs of shorts, and I moved. And I went to Seattle to see Marcelo, and I went and trained with him. And he said to me, "Nick, what are you doing, man?" And I said, I'm moving to Greece. And he said, "Oh, yeah." He goes, "That's cool, man. What are you going to do in Greece?" I said, "I'm going to teach jiu-jitsu." And he said, "Oh, cool, man. When you get set up, call me. I'll come visit you." So I hopped on a plane, and I ended up on a little island called Paros in Greece, where no one had ever heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So once again, I was in a small community and that didn't know what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was.
Did they have another martial arts scene there, or it was just?
No, they had a Taekwondo. They had a couple of Taekwondo schools and a couple of Wing Chun karate schools there.
Okay.
But they had never seen Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And since I had a background in Taekwondo, I was able to go into the Taekwondo schools and meet the guys there and do some training. And then I was kind of on the side showing them a little bit of what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is. And some of the guys were like, "Wow, that's really cool. We want to learn that." And so I started teaching them, and that slowly grew. And I ended up having a school, a fair-sized school. The community there was only 9,000 people on the island. And I had a school of about 15 to 20 regular students coming there and training. And out of that 15 or 20, I now have 8 purple belts that are continuing to train and teach on Paros.
How often do you get back to visit?
I try to go back a few times a year,
Nice.
just to help them out and do seminars and hang out, do promotions and that kind of stuff. But yeah, and then let's see, I've been in Cyprus now. I'm living in Cyprus, and I've been here for 2 years. 2 years already. Yeah. So,
Nice.
yeah. So basically, yeah, I mean, I've just been, but basically I've been traveling from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since I left the United States only. I haven't done anything else, and each time I go in and start teaching people, and, I know that people are interested in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and interested in getting the knowledge. And once they see it and they try it, I know that they're going to love it. And so it kind of carries you, it can carry you, I guess.
Nice. All right,
Yeah.
Nick, I've got some questions for you, but before we get into the questions, I wanted to tell the listeners more specifically about how you and I came to meet, how my jiu-jitsu journey started, and the role that you play in it. I don't know if you remember, but you had put out some flyers or some coupons for free lessons for kids, like 2 months free trial or something. And I stumbled upon one of those, and I brought my kids in. And after watching the adults come on the mats after the kids class, I thought, man, this is something I want to do. I was 36, 37 at the time, going to school part-time, working part-time. And after talking to you for a bit, I found out I think most students were coming 2-3 times a week, and I think your rates were $80 or something. And I said, I'd love to try it, but I can't afford the $80. What if I just come one night a week? And so you said sure, and you gave me a deal for like $40 or something. Mm-hmm. And a few weeks later, there was talk about some tournaments in Houston, or in Portland. I thought, man, I'd like to go to those, but I got to train more. So I asked you if I could trade you some Dungeness crab for extra lessons. And you said sure. And so I brought you in a bunch of Dungeness crab, and then when I felt like I'd got to the end of that little unwritten contract, I brought you in some firewood for your furnace to heat the gym, and then I brought you in some more crab. And so long story short, as I trained for a year or so, a minimal dues, and I paid the rest with Dungeness crab and firewood.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And we had that wood stove inside the gym in that basement, the garage that I had converted.
Yeah.
That was actually the second space I was in. Now I remember. Okay.
So anyway.
Flooded. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, then I took a few years off after I moved to Texas. I couldn't find a suitable place to train, and my schedule was jacked up. And So when I was 43, 44, I went to work in Brazil, and I started training again then, and I've trained steady ever since. But I would not have had the interest or the confidence to find a school to train at down there if I hadn't trained with you, and I wouldn't have trained with you if you hadn't been kind enough and flexible enough to work out some payment plans. So we're here today. I'm still training jiu-jitsu today because of your kindness. So thanks, man.
And it's always been my style. Money has come second in every situation as far as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is concerned. And if people want to train, man, I want them to be able to train for sure. So, man, yeah, that's right. I remember the crab down. That's awesome. I love Dungeness crab, but that's one of the things I miss.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and it was great to hear back from you after so many years and that you're teaching. I mean, I love to see old students that continue after I'm gone and do their own thing and open schools and teach. And, it's really, that's one of the gratifying things about being a BJJ instructor, I think, is seeing your students become instructors and, or have it, maybe they're not full-time, but have it as a part of their life, passing it on to other people. I think
nice.
That's what it's about.
I didn't have this as a question, but you just prompted me to think about it. Do you have any idea how many students you've graduated to black belt?
I have not graduated any student of mine from white belt to black belt. I have graduated other students from other affiliations who ended up training with me to black belt and brown belt.
Okay.
But I have not yet been in a place long enough to graduate them to black belt. And I'll tell you honestly, I feel that when a student, has become a proper purple belt, they have the road. I don't know. My personal opinion about the road from purple belt to black belt is kind of one of self-discovery and self-motivation, and really, you've got to reach inside to make that last part of the journey. And of course, it's, you want to have your instructor there, as I had, Marcelo backing me up, and, my students who are purple belts have me backing them up. And anytime they need anything, I'm there to help them in any way I can. But I mean, there's if you're lucky enough to go to a school where the head instructor, master instructor is there to teach you through until black belt, and they are available all the time, that's great. But jiu-jitsu, I think in many places, and especially around here in Europe, is so new. It's hard for people to find schools with black belts who are teaching, actually. And back when I was teaching in Astoria, it was the same thing. The closest black belts were in Portland and in Seattle, I think, to Astoria. So, but I think you can make, being a motivated purple belt and training hard and teaching, if you're teaching as a let's say a assistant instructor, or with the permission of your instructor. You're going to learn a lot through your teaching, and you're going to progress a lot through your teaching, because it forces you to really be self-critical and do the research and the study and the work you need to do in order to teach your students well.
Yeah, teaching is definitely a great way to learn. How besides that, how did you continue to progress as a purple belt? You were training primarily with white belts for a long time.
Yeah, I was, and it seems to be a thing with me, because everywhere I go, I end up with a fresh group of white belts that I have to teach, and it can be daunting sometimes, and it can leave me sort of feeling that I'm not doing the necessary to keep myself on par and learning. But at the same time, like you say, through teaching and many white belts, you have to teach them all the basics, and you have to really know the basics very well to build their foundation. And each one of those white belts is different shape, size, fitness level, whatever, and you have to accommodate those kind of situations. And so I think you do learn a lot, both about the jiu-jitsu and about yourself when you're teaching. And as far as your own challenges to become a better jiu-jitsu player, you really have to just find ways to drill with your students that is beneficial to you, you know. And sometimes that means having maybe I'll talk in kilograms, or a 200-pound wrestler or whatever has a background in wrestling, holds you down, and you work your escapes. You know, you just have to find ways to use your students as tools to help you to continue to improve and keep your jiu-jitsu good, you know.
Right. I imagine you handicap yourself on a regular basis, either only go left-handed or always start in bad positions and things like that.
Exactly. You know, there's always a way, I think. And, you know, I'm really fortunate here in Cyprus, because Cyprus has a very strong jiu-jitsu community, and a very high level group of black belts actually are here in Cyprus from Brazil. We have a guy named Lucas. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's the nephew of the guy that started the Alliance organization. And he started training when he was 3 years old, and he's 26 now. He fought Leandro Lo at one time and did really well against him. I don't think he beat him, but the guy's an animal. He's a beast, and he lives near me here. So, you know, I try to hook up with as many of the black belts that are around as much as possible at open mats and doing stuff like that. So, you know, I'm not lacking for good teammates to roll with, you know.
Yeah, and they just keep getting younger and faster and stronger too. So
exactly, yeah, you know, and the purple belts are no joke either. You know, even I want to say even some of the blue belts are no joke.
Yeah,
so, yeah. Nowadays, I mean, I think the level has really gone up for every belt level because of the fact that there's so much information available, and any motivated jiu-jitsu player can go online, pick up techniques, drill them and get really dangerous really fast, you know?
Right. And you don't have to be too far into your training to be able to watch the YouTube videos and determine which ones are kind of BS and which ones are legitimate. So, yeah, there's lots of information out there.
Exactly. And which is great for me as an instructor too, because, you know, I very often watch videos on YouTube I like watching matches, you know. I like to watch the matches more so than the technique videos.
Right.
Once in a while, if there's a cool technique video, it's cool to check it out and then go try it. But I don't know, the way I see techniques is, if I watch a match and it's a black belt match and the black belt gets a really good sweep, I'll go back and replay that as many times as I can until I figure out exactly how he set that up and caused that sweep to happen. You know, I think that's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick,
go ahead.
I've got a couple questions for you about progressing through the ranks. Your answers might be informative to some of our students. The first question is, what are some of the first things you think a white belt should learn? You get a new guy come in your class, the first couple months, what are you focusing on with that guy?
I am actually writing a book for my students right now. It's going to be exclusively for my students about that very subject.
Awesome.
And I think the most important thing that a white belt should learn is all the basic foundational fundamentals of jiu-jitsu. And I'm using, that's a broad term, but for example, know what the mount position is, know what kazakatame position is, know what reverse kazakatame position is, know what the knee on the belly is, know what north-south is, know what the guard, the full guard is, the half guard. Just the individual positions to know what they are. So if I go into my school and all my white belts are there and I say, okay, everybody get in 100 kilogram position, they should all know what that position is without me showing them again.
And you mean more than just laying sideways across your opponent, but where your pressure should be and
yes,
draw space.
Yeah. Yeah. The details of the position. I want them to know what does the perfect 100 kilogram position look like, and the person underneath, what does it feel like, and where should your hands be? What should you be? Just that structure, the structure of the position.
Nice. Okay.
And I am adamant about my students learning these things. I drill it into them, and I will, I'll say, right, and I number the positions. For example, position 1, 100 kilogram position, position 2, attack 100 kilogram position 3, Kazakatami position 4, reverse Kazakatami, position 5, north-south. And those are my first 5 positions, which I posted on my Facebook page recently, a student just in the positions.
Okay, nice.
And I'll tell you, it's strange, but just that little thing, just that little group, it gives my students a knowledge of what to do once they pass the guard and they're in side control. What should they be doing, and how to transition. And then it comes how to transition from one position to the next properly.
So far you've talked a lot about positions, now transitions, still no submissions or sweeps.
And let me go back to that. Okay, let me go back. Okay, for me, it's a you need to know the very most basic things first. And like I was talking about, the positions, the mount, the back mount, and let's say, okay, let's go to the sweeps. Scissor sweep, Kimura sweep, pendulum sweep, and for closed guard sweeps. Those 3 sweeps, to me, for white belts, should be that those are the ones I teach first.
Yeah, you won't get any argument from me.
So I have a list. I basically have a list of the most basic foundation moves that I want my students to know, and that's kind of what I'm writing about in my attempt at writing a technique book for jiu-jitsu for the white belt. Basically, a notebook.
Nice.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have your students roll right away when they come in, or do you have them do a couple weeks of just positional training first?
Generally, I have a few higher belts. I don't let my white belts roll with other white belts because they inevitably get injured. I will let them roll with my blue belts, purple belts, myself. I roll a lot with my students, and until I'm kind of not so old school as far as rolling, where you've got to kill your opponent when you're learning, but you've got to learn to move and to breathe and to be and not be rigid in your rolling. And nice. So I first make my blue belts and purple belts understand not to be rigid, and then they pass that on to the white belts, because I prefer the white belts to learn how to move, how to flow in their rolling. And that way it avoids a lot of injuries, whether or not I make sure they know you're not in there to beat each other. You're not in there to show who's the toughest guy or who can tap out who. You're in there to learn and to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that's kind of my philosophy of teaching,
Nice.
And Nick, and then of course, when they become, my blue belts and purple belts, they know what hard rolling is, and that usually is done amongst themselves and with me.
Nice.
But in the white belt realm, I like all my white belts to first learn, like I said, the foundation, and then learn how to move through those movements. Like I said, going from 100 kilogram to Kazakatami to position 2 to knee on the belly to mount to whatever. And I don't teach some fancy moves, not at that level.
Nice. So you've obviously put a lot of thought into this part of the students' progression. How about blue belt expectations? Where do you expect your students to be before you think they're ready for blue belt?
I expect them to know all these basics that I'm talking about. I also expect them to know the self-defense. I do have a curriculum of self-defense techniques that I expect them to know. I've kept a lot of the same requirements that I had when you were training with me, but I've basically structured it more now where a white belt has to be able to know, for example, every guard position: full guard, half guard, de la riva guard, spider guard, X guard, lasso guard. Basically know what those things are. They don't necessarily have to know how to use them, but they need to know what they are. I want a big vocabulary, and then when I feel like they've reached that, then I expect them to be able to use the basics for their rolling and do a good job using the basics. Usually I can usually tell when they're ready for their blue belt. And I do that in a combination of knowing their knowledge and also of myself rolling with them, because generally if they roll with me, I can kind of feel what level they're at.
Yeah.
And I kind of judge that. I mean, I think when you roll with, what belt are you now? Purple?
I'm purple, yes.
Okay. So when you're rolling with a white belt as opposed to when you're rolling with a blue belt, or you should know the difference between those two.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it's the same for me. I'm a 3rd degree black belt, and I know when I'm rolling with a blue belt, a purple belt, a brown belt, and a black belt. I know the differences, and I know the difference between a higher level brown belt or a higher level purple belt to a just got my purple belt guy. So,
okay, I got you.
I think through what's it been now, like 17 years of teaching jiu-jitsu and rolling with all kinds of people from all different places and things, you kind of just develop a feel for it.
Absolutely. Do you consider other things when you're promoting students? For instance, what they do off the mat, their attendance, if they're consistent, if they're helpful to other students? Do you consider character? Are any of those things part of your thinking when you're progressing students?
Absolutely. The attendance is big. How they treat other students is huge. As far as what they do on their own free time outside the school that I don't know about, generally I don't get involved in their personal life. But as far as coming into the academy, you can pretty much, I think I can pretty much tell if someone is of good character morally and what would you say? And yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't care to nitpick people's personal lives, but being a good teammate is crucial, I think.
Yeah, and I think if someone is a good teammate, it kind of says a lot about their personality and character. I think you can tell how someone is by the way that they treat other people. And also, I don't know if you notice it, but I can usually tell someone's personality by rolling with them, how they roll with me. If they're a really aggressive person, or if they're an insecure person, or if they're just a really open and mellow type of person. But I can usually tell rolling with someone how they are as a human, But I've got a guy that my partner on the north here. He's a blue belt under me, and he's a dentist, and he's a very intense person, and he loves training hard, and everything he does 110%, and he's just really keen to get better at jiu-jitsu. And when you roll with him, you can tell, because he moves really fast and he really tries to get you, and he's excited about it and whatever, and yeah. So.
That's awesome.
I think it goes on a personality thing too. If you get someone in there that doesn't. I've had students that just don't jive with my personality teaching, and then it's time for them to find another instructor, because we're gonna have a pretty close relationship if I'm teaching you and we're training together and we're building a team together. It's if you don't like your instructor, I think you should go find another instructor.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that's a difference between the traditional martial arts and jiu-jitsu? Did you find you had that kind of relationship with your Tae Kwon Do instructor?
My Tae Kwon Do instructor was a completely different dynamic because Tae Kwon Do has such a hierarchy type of structure that it was much more military, and you just didn't get as close. I think that in jiu-jitsu, you get much closer with your instructors. You get more, you get more personal with them. Whereas in that old school Tae Kwon Do style, it's very military. It's yes, sir, no, sir. You bow. If you're disrespectful, you do push-ups, and there is no crossing that line. There's a line, and you just don't cross it.
Yeah, that's my perception as well. It's one of the things I love.
So yeah, and it's one of the things I like about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu too, because there is room for, some of my students I'm really good friends with. Some of them, I'm friends with all my students, but some I'm closer friends with. We do things together, and some of them is just in the class we're good friends, and it's just a different kind of dynamic, I think, than the traditional military style martial art.
Nick, you familiar with the term the blue belt blues?
Yes, I am.
Would you say that oftentimes that's the students just simply plateauing? And how would you encourage students or advise students to break through that stage in their development?
I think one of the most important things that, at least to me, is to never really think about your belt. There's so much talk about, what do I need to do to go from blue belt to purple belt? Or what do I need to go from purple belt to brown belt? And I wrote something recently on my Facebook, all you really need to do is go to class and train a lot for a very, very long time, and your belt will change color by itself. I think that if you think about your belt, I'm a blue belt and I've been a blue belt for 3 years or for 5 years or whatever it is, well, either there's a good reason that your professor hasn't promoted you, or you're with the wrong professor, and you have to make that determination. I don't think, I think, and I also think that people who do end up quitting as blue belts would have quit regardless of whether they were blue belt or purple belt or white belt, if they had been doing it that long. I think jiu-jitsu, you love it and you train it because you love it and because you appreciate the good things it does for you, or you find other things in life that you like more than jiu-jitsu, and you think of it more as a hobby and you don't really care so much to continue doing it. I think it's kind of like anything. If you like building models, and you continue to build models your whole life because it's really cool to build models, you'll continue doing it. But if you just do it like me, I don't really enjoy building models that much, but I would build one model, but then I might not build another one for years.
Right. Yeah. I guess if you really love something, you don't need external motivation to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
I think that's the thing, is that, like for me, jiu-jitsu, I can't go 3 days without training jiu-jitsu. If I'm out of the class for 3 days and I haven't done a jiu-jitsu workout, I start getting really ornery. Like I get in a really bad mood, and I'm not happy at all. So I just know I'm like, I need to get to class. And also, if I don't go to class and get a good workout and feel like I really pushed myself, and I'm like, I still train to where my hands are shaking at the end of class. That for me is a good session. If I went in there, trained hard enough that at the end of class my hands are shaking, I feel good. And if I leave class and I haven't really broken a sweat, I don't, even teaching, I don't feel very good. Like if I'm in a class and we're just doing techniques and I haven't broken a sweat, I'll stay after class and I'll do drills and I'll do whatever I need to do to get to where I want to feel at the end of training jiu-jitsu. Because I don't just think of it as a teacher. I think of it as training. Like every time I go to class, I don't think, oh, I'm going to teach jiu-jitsu. I'm going to train jiu-jitsu, and my students are training with me. That's
nice.
kind of my mentality about training.
Yeah, I love that attitude, Nick. Hey, you mind if I ask you a few questions about competition?
Go for it.
Have you competed much over the last few years, or do your students compete? What role does that play in your jiu-jitsu these days?
My opinion of competitions, in answering your question, have I competed? Yes, I have. I've competed since I've been in Europe. I competed in the Greek Nationals. I competed in the European Championships 2014, 15, and 16. My students have also competed at the big tournaments, and they've done very, very well. I'm pretty famous for putting people on the podium here. If you train with me and you do compete and you're going to go to a competition, you will have a very good chance of medaling. And if you don't medal, you will have put up a very good fight. You will be prepared. But I'm not the kind of coach like, oh, competition is the most important thing. But I do. If you want to compete, and you're gonna put it, and you train under me, you are gonna put the work in to deserve to be competing. So if you don't, doesn't sound like you put that big of an emphasis on it. There are benefits to competing. How do your students reap those same benefits if they're not competing? Does that make any sense? It does. It does make sense. The difficulty here is that there are not that many competitions. There's the IBJJF, but it's in every different country at different times, and you need to have money to go travel there. It's not like you can just get in your car and drive to a competition, once a month and there's something going on. For example, here in Cyprus, we have 1 or 2 competitions a year. And that's what the locals prepare for. And then Athens, Greece is pretty close to us, and they have quite a few competitions, and the people from here go there to compete because it's like $50 to fly to Athens.
Yeah.
But
So
as far as how my students, the student, I kind of promote a little bit of competition between my students inside my own school, but friendly competition. When we do open mats and when we do advanced class free sparring stuff, and then we also go to open mats at other schools. We go visit Gracie Baja. We go visit this Russian guy and his students, and so we all get together. And it gets a little bit competitive at the open mats, but not in a bad way, in a healthy way, where they're just playing their technique and just tuning themselves. But most people that train here do it as a hobby and not as a becoming a top competitor gold medalist. But the ones that want to do that, of course, have the facility to do it. They can get the training they need to do it.
Nice. For those that do compete, there's a saying that goes around: there's winning and there's learning. But that sometimes is a hard transition to make when you lose a match. How do you get a student to change their perspective so they can see that losing event as a positive?
I think I show them through example, because I usually lose when I compete. So, I go there and I compete, and the last 3 years I've got a 3rd place medal at the IBJJF only because there aren't enough people in my division. So I don't really brag too much about it, but I have good fights. I mean, I have good guys in my division, but I do feel that every time I go and that I do not win the match, I do learn many, many things about myself and about what I need to work on and how I can improve. And I'm not afraid to compete next to my students and lose, win or lose.
Nice.
It's not. I don't know, because I definitely am not a good competitor. You know, I'm a good teacher. I'm a good school grappler inside my own school, and I'm a good grappler at open mats and things like that. But in competition, I still kind of, you know, forget my game and what I want to do, and get confused, and you know, end up with someone in side control who doesn't like the last Europeans I did. I fought this judo guy, and he ended up passing my guard, and he took side control, and he smashed me in side control. He wouldn't move. He was getting out of breath holding me in side control, and he was getting penalties after penalty after penalty, but he already had enough points that the penalties didn't matter. And so he just held me the entire time. It was really annoying. And he was exhausted after, and I was like, I hadn't even fought, you know, I wasn't even breathing hard. I was just like, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
And such a basic thing, you know, it was just like, so I went back to the drawing board, and I just had my guys hold. I never want to get stuck in side control like that again. You know, I never want to have a situation where I cannot get out of that position for 5 minutes, because it's a 5-minute round. That's the other problem, is that the Masters is only 5 minutes. I much prefer a longer match. I would prefer 10 minutes.
Yeah, that doesn't give you much time to get your game going.
No, at all. It doesn't give you any time, especially in that kind of a scenario. I don't know if you've ever been held down by a dude that has a really strong side control, but it sucks.
Yeah.
I know my side control sucks. If I get side control on somebody, they're not moving. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If that's your only objective,
you know. And I think that's the thing, you know. And I think about competition, you really have to go there with the mindset that you're going to have a good time, that you're going to have fun, you're going to do your best, you're going to stay relaxed. The best. You know, every time I've competed at my best, and this is probably cliche, but it's when I've been the most relaxed. Like, I remember one tournament, it was on the West Coast in Washington, and I was fighting in brown belt division, and I took second at that tournament, and I beat this judo guy, judo brown belt and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt. And just prior to going in the match, I had been playing with some kids in the hallway, warming up, just kind of messing around with these kids, and I wasn't thinking about anything. And I heard my name being called, and I ran out there, jumped over the fence, slapped hands with the dude, and boom, went to town, and I ended up choking him. You know, and I don't even know how I did it. It was like I was so relaxed. I just was like, okay, this is cool. You know, and it's hard to get in that. I think you have to get in a certain mindset when you're going to go in and compete.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your approach to competition is a little refreshing, actually, and I'm sure I haven't heard too many other instructors be that honest and forthcoming with their wins and losses.
No, really, I know. I suck at jiu-jitsu competitions. I have not suck, but I go there and do it. You know, that's the thing, is that, you know, whatever. I know I'm very confident about my teaching, and I know I've taught some really good jiu-jitsu players that went on. I've had a lot of guys that have trained with me, a lot of my students that have made me very proud at competitions, and I love watching them win. I mean, I get more nervous about my students competing than myself competing, really. You know, because I know to some of them it's really important. You know, it's really important that they do well, and part of that is that they want to show me that they're up to level and that they're going to do a good job. Even though to me it's not really that important that they do a good job. To me, it's just important that they go out there and have a good time. But many of them have really performed well in the bigger tournaments.
I think knowing where you stand on that probably helps your students to relax and just go out there and grapple without the pressure. I've got to represent the gym. I've got to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And to me, it's not a huge. You know, my gyms are very small. My student groups are between 15 and 25 max, really, that I teach. And that's I like that, actually. I don't think I'd like to have a school with 100 students.
No, that smaller group really helps you maintain that family type dynamic.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that's kind of how I like that.
Nick, have you had to deal with any injuries throughout your career?
I have had a few injuries. The worst injury I had was a dislocated right shoulder, and I tore the bicep muscle, which is still torn from my chest. And for 1 year, I couldn't even, there was no way I could do a pull-up, and I could barely push 1 pound weights in a bench situation. And I basically was teaching at the time, and I just tied my arm to my side, and I taught one-armed for a year until I was able to start using my right arm again, and I'm right-handed, so it kind of sucked. It was a little bit scary because I didn't know how well it was going to heal. I was grappling with a huge purple belt, and he did a weird kind of Americana lock, and he sort of fell backwards, and it just popped right out. It was the most painful thing. It was awful. But it was go ahead.
What's the status of your arm now?
It's okay. I can do pull-ups. I can do push-ups, It's okay. I mean, if I start getting tired, I can feel it. It bothers me in certain situations, but nothing too serious. I mean, it healed. And I found that with most injuries, I mean, I've had some knee problems, but they eventually heal. I find that keeping my body fit, doing a lot of push-ups, a lot of squats, doing my warm-ups, and just basically staying in good shape helps your body to heal and stay strong. I think if you stop, obviously, your muscles start to weaken, and then some of these old injuries and things like that, probably you can feel them more. So I think it's really important to just keep your body strong, flexible, and moving.
So your strength and conditioning philosophy is do jiu-jitsu and do body weight exercises primarily?
Yeah, for sure. I do.
Nice.
I do all body weight exercises. I do hundreds of push-ups. I do thousands of squats. I do hundreds of sit-ups of all kinds. I do core exercises. I do some yoga stretching. And I grapple a lot, and I don't grapple, I grapple loose a lot where I'm folded in half quite a bit. And being 50 years old, I do feel my flexibility starts, if I don't keep it up, I can lose it pretty quickly. So it's important for me to have, to be, when I'm rolling with someone, to have them come around and me do a berimbolo and then basically to fold me up just to keep my flexibility. I find that basically through rolling you can maintain good flexibility if you roll good.
Nice. Nick, we're coming to the end of our time here. I got a couple of bigger, I guess, less well-defined questions. Can you tell me about a time when jiu-jitsu was difficult or you doubted if you were going to continue the path and how you overcame that?
There were situations that happened while I was teaching that sort of made me question whether I wanted to teach people jiu-jitsu, because I've always sort of, I don't know, my goal of jiu-jitsu is to help other people and to help them to learn, and it's never been to make money and be sort of a business and be competitive with other businesses. And really I'll tell you what turned me off of Tae Kwon Do was that business side of it, where every testing you had to pay and you wanted to get as many students as you could. And it kind of started to look to me more like a money-making thing. And if I see jiu-jitsu going in that direction, I think I'll lose that would probably cause me to lose interest in it.
I gotcha.
But as far as training and grappling and things that happen to me in jiu-jitsu from a ego standpoint of not winning or not being good enough or whatever, I've never really. I just love the training. I've always loved the training.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I see today, I see big schools and I see people, charging thousands of dollars for seminars, and I don't know. I look at that and it does kind of disappoint me a little bit. Where, you know, I can understand you've got to make a living and whatever, but to pay one guy who's won a bunch of world championships or whatever $5,000 to come to your school to do a seminar, I think is a bit extreme.
Yeah, I've only attended a few seminars and only taken a few private lessons, and yeah, I just can't afford it. I can't justify it. So I'm with you. I don't think I'll ever pay $150 for a private lesson or anything of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, I charge here on Cyprus. I charge 20 euros, which is the equivalent of $20 an hour for private lessons. And I sell somebody 5 private lessons for 100 euros.
Man, so, that's a bargain.
Yeah, and I have a purple belt instructor who has his own school here, who I've been doing privates for 2 years now. He's a great guy, awesome martial artist. He also teaches karate, and we do morning lessons, and he buys 5 lessons at a time, and he progressed from no stripes on his purple belt to now 4 stripes on his purple belt, and it's really been a pleasure teaching him, and it's that, I love to see the progression. I love to see people benefit, especially higher belts too.
Nice.
Yeah. Anything
we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about, Nick?
Yeah, not really. I think I think jiu-jitsu is a journey. We say that a lot. It's a bit of a cliche. But you have to find your own journey and how it satisfies you and makes you happy and fills a part of your life that, otherwise would not be as satisfying, and I mean, I love to travel. I love to visit other countries. I love to visit other schools. I love going to a place and introducing jiu-jitsu where people have never heard of it before. And that's kind of been my journey since I left the United States. But yeah, I came up with a saying is that jiu-jitsu will either take you, make you, or break you.
sometimes all in one class.
Yeah, exactly. It'll either take you, make you, or break you. And I'm a big believer in that, because I've seen people broken by it. I've seen people leave and quit. I've seen people taken from, you look at some of these Brazilians that have been taken from the favelas in Rio de Janeiro and come to America and, made big schools and been successful and taught really great jiu-jitsu to big teams and, and people who have made their life from jiu-jitsu. And I think that, I'm like I said, I'm 50 years old, and I think the second half of my life is being made by Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because the first half was a little confusing. At one time I was a businessman, an international trading company, doing commodities, making all the money and buying the fancy cars and having the fancy house and all that kind of stuff, but it didn't give me half the satisfaction that I've gotten since I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I think that's a pretty wonderful thing.
That's what life's supposed to be about.
And to be able to hear from an old student like yourself is really an honor for me, because, I know you never forget your first instructor, and, you good, bad, or ugly, you remember it as you remember it. And you remember it as paying me with Dungeness crab and firewood, which really was appreciated, because, man, I love those crab, and firewood's a good thing to have on a cold winter night. So, and I think that's kind of we can say an example of jiu-jitsu. You gave me crab and wood. You gave me food to eat and wood to heat my home, and I gave you jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture, man.
So that's it. And that's in a nutshell, man. And that's how I still live now. I mean, I'm not rich, but I live well. I have a roof over my head. I have good food. I'm in good shape. I have my health. And I think that's the most important thing. And I have good friends.
Nice. Hey, before we wrap it up, is there anybody you want to give a shout out to? Any of your affiliates or previous instructors or somebody that's helped you out over the career?
Yeah, I do. I want to give a shout out to the whole team of BJJ, Marcelo Alonso, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Seattle, Washington. Marcelo has been a great influence and a great supporter of everything that I've been doing here in Europe, and he's never questioned my ability to carry the name of BJJ. And for that, I really appreciate his support and all the teammates at the academy in Seattle who have come here and visited and kind of seen what I've been doing. A special to Kevin Watson, who is my oldest friend and training partner in martial arts. He started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu after Tae Kwon Do, and we started Tae Kwon Do together in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He was a 16 or 17-year-old black belt at the time, and he's now teaching at KW BJJ in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he is part of the BJJ team also. And I want to give a shout out to all the folks at BJJ Eastern Europe for their great support in helping me to advertise my camps and the different things that I do for getaway jiu-jitsu vacations.
Yeah, anything you'd like to promote, and maybe you can give the listeners some ways to get a hold of you and follow you on social media.
The best way to follow me is on Facebook. On Nick Unander is the name on Facebook, and to add me on there. I also have an Instagram, which is also under my name, I think, Nick Unander. And that's really the best way to follow me. And if they want to get a hold of me, they can do it through that venue.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you're available for seminars and whatnot in the area where you live.
I am available for seminars anywhere in the world, my friend. I can move around and travel anywhere. I prefer to stay near to home around Europe, though. Yeah. I told you I recently took back my Swedish citizenship, so I am a dual citizen, U.S. and European now.
Nice. Well, certainly give me a heads up if you make it back to the States anytime soon.
I will, Joe.
All right, Nick, it's been really good talking to you, man. This went about as I expected. It was very interesting.
Great to talk to you too, and thanks very much. I hope that everybody enjoys the podcast, and maybe we can do another one another time.
Certainly.
Yeah, Nick, I've had a blast. I've just been listening and taking some notes and enjoying the conversation between you and Joe. And hopefully you're the only one that Joe's giving crabs to. But
yeah, I hope so.
as far as I know.
Oh, geez, that was.
But, actually, Byron, I used to give crabs to everybody.
Big ones too, man. Big ones. Anyway, all right. And Byron, nice to meet you. Please stay in touch.
Absolutely.
And yeah, anytime if you guys are in Cyprus or if you plan on sort of going to the European Championships or whatever, I'm usually there. Give me a shout. We can get together and go eat. They have great sushi. And the European Championships in Lisbon is one of the best organized tournaments that I have ever been to. And it's a really fun tournament. You have the best people in the world competing there. I met the year before last, I met Mackenzie Dern, train going to the tournament, and we talked a little bit. I was like, hey, what's up? Really like your jiu-jitsu. And she was really sweet and funny and laughing. And I got, right before I was going out to compete, she was coming to compete. And she saw me standing there. She's like, hey, Nick, waving to me. And she'd only met me for like 5 minutes. She's like, hey, man, good luck. Do a good job, and it was cool. It was a really good experience. So you just, everybody under one roof. There were, at that tournament, I think there were over 5,000 competitors. It was one of the biggest in the world. And Lisbon is very inexpensive place to visit, and the food is amazing, and the atmosphere is great. So highly recommended.
That would be amazing to see.
Yep. And they have and don't worry, they have a masters division. You know, you got a lot of old guys going there and competing. I met this one Brazilian guy. He was like 70 years old, and he was just there on vacation. And he heard about it, so he was signed up before, and he was just going out there to compete. And I think he won the gold medal in his division.
That's that relaxed state of mind you're talking about.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay,
thanks, guys. Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Nick. Y'all have a good evening. We'll see you.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, thanks so much, Nick and Joe, for the interview. And actually, shortly after this interview happened, Nick broke his collarbone, kind of a freak accident while training, something that it was just a weird situation. And wishing him a healthy, speedy recovery. Following him on Facebook. He's really doing pretty good. I'm impressed with his recovery and how it's going, but definitely impressed with the way he's continuing on with a broken collarbone.
Yep, we wish you get back on the mats. Well, actually, I think he is on the mats according to his Facebook page.
Yeah,
but
crazy.
We want you to get back to 100% as quick as possible, Nick. Byron, remember when we were getting ready to start this podcast, and you came up to me and you said, hey, Gary, you want to do a podcast? And my first words were, what's a podcast? And then you said, hey, it's kind of like an internet radio show. And I just remember, I was like, hey, if you want to do it, I'll do it. And then I just remember you like, yeah, we can try it. I don't know. It's kind of scary jumping into new territory.
Oh, super scary.
Territory I've never been. And yeah, I just remember you were like, and actually me, we're like, what if this doesn't work? What if we just do 2 episodes? What if people laugh us out? And, there was a little bit of fear of starting this. And it kind of reminds me of the article we have this week from the Gentleman Grappler, Overcoming Fear in BJJ.
I think fear can become a big thing in any part of your life. And if it's on the mats with you, it'll definitely hold you back.
Yeah, definitely. There is a lot of fear. I remember even just starting jiu-jitsu, and I think I've told this story before, but, Byron and I started, we're not from a big city. Wichita is, 300,000 people, Byron?
Yeah.
But, we never had, back 15 years ago, we didn't have we had a real instructor and everything, but it wasn't necessarily a real school. I remember when it first started, it was in somebody's backyard, and you never trained over there, Byron, because I started a couple weeks before, which I always like to let people know. But before we moved over to the back of that golf place, Byron, it was actually in somebody's backyard. And I remember, calling our instructor, and talking to him, and he tells me, he's like, hey, go into this backyard, don't worry about the dog. There's a oversized garage there. Just come on in. And so, I was going to show up for my first day, and, I was scared, and I get in my car and I drive all the way down there, and I drive and I see the house, and I just kept driving by it. I was scared to stop. I didn't stop. And, that was my first time. I didn't stop. I went home and, got mad at myself and told myself, next time I'm going to stop. There was fear of starting it. I didn't know if, I'm thinking BJJ, but back then, I just thought of like the fighters I saw, Hoist Gracie, Half Gracie, I was like, okay, I'm probably going to get my teeth folded back and get punched and kicked. And really, I just want to learn some submissions. But, it was scary jumping in the first time. And I got to admit, I did have some fear of starting jiu-jitsu. But, it's like you said, we're going to have fear in a lot of stuff we start, probably your first time, going into a burning building. And you probably have fear every time you go into a burning building.
No, I would say that, like with anything, with experience, fear kind of goes away. Most burning buildings, a building is a little more intimidating than just a regular house, because buildings have things in them that chemicals and weird stuff. Kind of where I work, they've got a lot of weird buildings. But those can be a little more scary, a lot more scary than just going into a house fire, which it could be dangerous, but more exciting, I think, more wanting to get the job done and do a good job of it than thinking about fear. I mean, you're just going to do it regardless of whether you're afraid or not. I mean, it's not really that big a deal anymore. But the way he's talking about here on the article, and the article is on gentlemangrappler.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. He talks a lot about fear. He talks about overcoming the fear of heights while bungee jumping. And then he's talking about taking away the fear. And if your jiu-jitsu fear is like competition or something like that, his advice is to just do that thing that makes you scared and realize that it probably wasn't that bad. And over your experience and that sort of thing, the fear will go away. And really try to tell yourself, one of my things I have, tell yourself, I'm not scared of this, I'm excited about this. So you get a lot of the same energy that you would have for something that's scary as you would for something that's exciting. You get a little jittery, you can't really sit still, a little bit, your stomach might be a little nervous, and maybe you want to eat, maybe you don't want to eat. Like all these different emotions kind of come out of you. Just say, I'm excited, I'm not scared, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. And if you tell yourself that enough, you kind of believe it, and you become excited over scared or nervous.
Yeah, definitely. Like he talks about, face your fear head on. Like he says, it's not going to be easy, but, it's going to build character. And, as like Byron says, doing it up, over and over again, you start to dull that negative voice into your head. It's like pretty soon you're happy about it, kind of like what Byron says. And, you realize, like as he says, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match is not dangerous and you're actually quite safe. But what I really, really liked about this article is he just doesn't go into talking about, fear of jiu-jitsu or a jiu-jitsu competition or as he did, bungee. I like his, kind of right there at the start. He talks about, fear is part of our genetics. Instead of just, telling somebody, hey, you're fearful of this, let's understand it. Let's understand, why we are fearful of stuff. And, like he was just talking about, many years ago, we lived in small tribes. We had short lives, and there were woolly mammoths after us and saber-toothed tigers, and we grew to be fearful of stuff. And I like he talks about without genetics, humans were not afraid of natural predators. We needed to be afraid of those natural predators. Those saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths came after us to eat us. And he said like the ultra brave genetics were quickly removed from those small tribe gene pools, and we needed a fear of large predators. And and over time, where we don't have to fear that stuff anymore, it's you realize that you can face your fear head on and get rid of some of that stuff. We're not going to face, well, hopefully, I mean, some of us probably will, but where Byron and I live, we're not going to face a tiger. We don't have to worry about walking down the street and finding a tiger popping out of the woods or a silverback gorilla. We don't have to worry about things like that.
Yeah. Gary, you mentioned a bit of nervousness, almost fear or whatever, I don't know what you want to call it, about going to your first jiu-jitsu class. Kind of awkward. It was in somebody's backyard. Maybe that fear wouldn't have been there if it was at back then there really wasn't established classes around here, but maybe if it was at a nice big school, big windows, you pull up, you could see inside of it, you can see people having a good time, that probably would have helped the fear. But if somebody is nervous about going to jiu-jitsu for the first time, how could they deal with that fear and get past that early onset fear of jiu-jitsu?
Basically face it head on. And I really do think that if it was in a regular storefront, I would have been, I think I probably would have stopped. One thing that really got me was, man, this isn't a house. It's really dark. And this, because it was at night, it was, wintertime, so it gets dark quick. And I just had visions of ending up like the gimp in the movie Pulp Fiction. I just didn't want to be kept in somebody's basement. And, that's what kind of got me. And even when I first started training, Byron, you remember the old golf shop, where we had to park next door at the donut shop, and there was no door on the wall. I remember walking over to that little bar. I walked into the bar and asked them if they knew where the jiu-jitsu place was, and nobody knew. And I'm just looking around, and back then nobody showed up on time, and I showed up like 10 minutes early. So I just stuck around for a few minutes hoping somebody would come by, and they did. But, it's the fear. It's the fear of the unknown. But, really, geez, once I got there, everybody introduced themselves. Everybody was nice to me. It's, it really wasn't that bad. But it was that big fear of the unknown. And, finally after, wimping out, I guess I would say the first time, I didn't face it, like, the gentleman grappler said to do. The second time I faced it, and everything worked out good.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
A couple of things that Gary's leaving out some critical details. He's worried about becoming like the Gimp in Pulp Fiction. If you didn't dress like the Gimp in Pulp Fiction, that would help your odds of not becoming like that. So, Gary is full attire, even has a mask on, and he's thinking about going to the backyard, and he hears people grunting and working out hard back there, and he chickened out. He wasn't ready to play that role quite yet. That would come actually many years later down the road. But you know what? You could also, if you were at a place and you want to go train and you're nervous and you are having to deal with that fear, taking a baby step instead of just the first step of going there and training, going there and watch. And
well, see, that's what Byron did, because I remember you did that. You showed up the first day to watch.
Yeah, I think that 2002 was a little ways back, but yeah. I think I remember planning on watching, and he just was like, "Come on this train," and
no, you watched.
Did I?
Because you walked out your first day. Because I remember I told myself some people are doers and some people are watchers. Byron likes to watch. Well, I like to do.
That's true. But when I did, I noticed in Gary's gym bag there was still the mask in there, and I was like, "Man,
that's why you just
watch. I can handle this." But I think
it's funny. Because a guy that I train with who has never trained anywhere but with me and, my group, and Byron, you've trained with him and stuff, but he went to try a new school the other day. And he was, he talked to me about it here this afternoon, and he was telling me how he was so nervous about going in, and he was afraid people were going to hurt him and this and that. And, basically what I told him, I was like, man, the people I found in jiu-jitsu are probably some of the nicest guys I've ever met. And I just think about it, all the people I know. You think of the people at your school, Byron, and really, I think the only time somebody doesn't get treated well is if you come into a school or academy or practice with an attitude, and you're not just looking to learn. You're in there looking to, test out your new moves on different people, and try to turn it into a competition or show that you're better than somebody. That's, I think, when you run into that. I just every time I've visited somebody else or trained with other people, and I just try to be as friendly as possible, and as Byron said, say something nice. But I've always been welcomed, and I guess probably because I don't bring my mask, as Byron says.
Yeah, keep it at home, Gary, or wherever else you might take that to, but it's not just.
Yeah.
We're getting deeper on your little troubles here.
Yeah, but I think that's an awesome article, not only for people already training jiu-jitsu looking to compete, people that are training jiu-jitsu, because I know there a lot of people do have fear of the rolling part of class. Not everybody's going to compete. I think it'll help you out on that. And then in my case, I think it'll help you when you want to train jiu-jitsu, your very first time. That's a tough time too. So definitely I think this is a great article that'll get more people training and make people realize that fear, we all have it. It's our genetics, and he gives some good advice on how to overcome it.
Yeah. I want to give a couple examples of like the baby step idea. If you are afraid of getting in an airplane, or because of the heights, or you're afraid of approaching or looking over a window that's very high up, tell yourself, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to go look out this 50-story window. I'm going to go up 5 floors on the elevator, hang out for a little while, and then that's the day. And then the next day you go and you look out the window, but you don't look down. And the next day you go look down, and then next day you go up to 10th floor, and you might do the same process. You just kind of work your way up there and realize it's still not that bad. Even for a tournament, it's hard to think about how do I baby step doing a tournament. Well, you definitely don't sign up for the biggest tournament you could find right away. But you could ask, hey, I would like to do a tournament, a little nervous. While we're training, let's keep score a little bit and work towards winning and pay attention, that sort of thing. That's one step in that direction. You could even take another step further and ask somebody to kind of referee you guys and keep score for you, and that way it feels like more of a match, and maybe have a few people even watch the thing, maybe even record it. Taking those little steps, getting there, takes some of the fear away. Also, I'm reminded that you don't want to put something like that, the movie, the 40-year-old virgin. You don't want to put something on a pedestal that doesn't need to be there. You don't need to make this tournament something super scary. Just go ahead and do it. So you could baby step towards it if that's what you need, but signing up and training hard will take away a lot of that nervousness as long as you remember to train hard and put in the work.
Well said, Byron. You are a very intelligent person.
Gary, you're the nicest guy I know.
Oh, thank you, Byron. That means a lot.
But I'll put a link to this article on the show notes. You can find the show notes on the website or in your phone if you just scroll down a little bit on the app that you're using. It's on gentlemangrappler.com. Check it out. There's a lot more details there.
Yep. It's a great place to check out articles. And speaking of that, we are having a Coach of the Year and an essay, or blog or of the year, a place where you, read articles. So definitely, send in about your instructor. Send in, if you like the Gentleman Grappler or whatever your favorite blog is. Send it to bjjbrick@gmail.com and tell us why it is your favorite blog or or why your instructor should be Coach of the Year. And the more content you put in there, the better chance he or she has of winning, or the blog has of winning. So, we did it last year with just the Coach of the Year, but this year we are evolving. So we decided to do the Essay of the Year too. So get those submissions in. Hey, how you like that, Byron? Submissions.
Nice.
Yeah, play your words, but to bjjbrick@gmail.com. And what we'll do is we'll have a group of people vote on them. It won't just be Byron and I, because we'd probably vote for ourselves, or, so we'll have probably Joe in there and some of our guys from Patreon. I know we talked about it. You can, if you're in Patreon, or, if you support us through Patreon, which we have a link to on the show notes, it's a website for content producers. You can, donate a little bit per show, and basically they're the ones who help keep the lights on, help keep the show going each and every week. They're very, very important people to this podcast. And basically, to be a Patreon supporter, you'll get a gi patch, a sticker, and then you get in the Facebook group. So if any of you guys are listening, you can just post in the Facebook group, hey, I'd like to, be on the panel to, pick the winners. We'll do it from there. But so definitely check out Patreon and get your submissions in for Coach and Essay of the Year.
Yeah, if you want to do your coach a favor, be a good student, pay attention, work hard, but you can go a step beyond and nominate them for Coach of the Year, and that would be awesome. I guess we haven't got as many essays in as we did last year. The podcast is growing, the audience is growing, but for some reason the essays aren't coming in like they did last year. So send them in. There's a better chance to win than there was last year. Write them up, make them good. Let us know why your coach is Coach of the Year. Look forward to seeing those.
Definitely look forward to seeing those.
Okay, many of you guys are wondering what happened to Gary's audiobook this week. It went south pretty quick.
And when we say south, we're talking Tijuana.
That's true. And so this special audiobook will be only on the app. If you want to go hear this week's audiobook, you got to get our app. It's absolutely free. Go to the iTunes App Store or the Google Play Store, wherever you get your apps from. It probably is there. And download it, and there'll be a thing that says episode 216, and look for the one that says Gary's audiobook. And you can listen to him. He gets me pretty good. Can I air it, I would say. But that's what the app's for.
I turned that one on you pretty quick there, Byron.
Yeah, that was one of your more extreme audiobooks, and I'm glad we have the app so we don't have to just delete it. But yeah, if you want to hear that, it's there.
It was actually nothing bad, though.
No,
Byron.
yeah.
We didn't go into detail.
It follows the rule that we go by, as in if there are kids in the car, perfectly fine. But
Can you imagine the kid asking Dad?
I think that would be an easy one to make up an answer for without having to get too sweaty.
Yeah.
But that's our app. We put a lot of times we'll put extra content from the end of the show or the beginning of the show. We always we get a decent amount of banter during the show, but always at the end or the beginning, we tend to have a good time kind of off air. And a lot of times I leak those off air conversations back onto the air, but just in the app. So you got to go there. You got to show up and actually want to hear that. And the app has been perfect for that. Had fun with that. Download it, check it out. It's free. Doesn't hurt you. And you can also listen to the podcast through the app if you don't have a favorite podcasting app that kind of collects them all for you. That's a good app to do that as well.
We are smack dab in the middle of the United States. We are in Wichita, Kansas. If you happen to be coming through Wichita, Kansas, send us an email, bjjbrick@gmail.com, or hit us up on our Facebook page through a private message. We'd love to train if you're in town, if you're looking to train. So get a hold of us. Also, let all your friends know about the BJJ Brick podcast. We really appreciate it when you tell others, and others let us know that, hey, I started listening to the podcast because of my buddy Jim. So thank you for everybody who's told your friends about us.
Yep. Find us on social media. We've got a bunch of stuff on there. Facebook, YouTube are our two biggest ones that we're posting regularly. Joe, who you heard today during the interview, posts a lot on social media for us through our Facebook page, and he comes up with some really cool stuff. That's a great reason to be there on that, and it always means a lot to us when you comment about the podcast on the podcast episode that is the post, or even like it, because that means you either give it an approval before you listen, which is impressive, or you listen to it and then go back and find our post and then comment or like on it. That is really cool that you guys do that, and really we notice all of those comments and likes that we get. So thank you guys for doing that, and if you want to join the fun, find us on our social media outlets. So we'll catch you guys next week. Next week we have none other than Craig Jones from Australia. Craig, I was watching ADCC with my buddy Jeremy, and he was the most impressive person I saw that was like just shocked with who he was beating. A lot of impressive things going on, obviously, with ADC. That might be an overstatement, but just like he blew me out of the water. Like, how is he doing this stuff? It was really cool to talk to him and learn about how he's training and what he's looking to do in the future. And just had an awesome time talking to Craig Jones. Very friendly, very funny. He had me laughing very much at the interview. So it'll be a great week next week.
Definitely do not miss it. Like Byron said, Craig Jones took ADCC by storm this year. Do not miss it.
Yep. Stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to pet your donkey.
You realize that will make sense to nobody but people who are on the app. But that's okay. Get the app, my friends.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that.
That's funny,
that
though.
Makes no sense.
Well, I'll keep... Yeah, it's funny.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Byron?
Yeah?
Byron, remember when we started this podcast and, you came up to me and you said you wanted to start a podcast? Hold on one second. Where'd you find that, buddy? Hey, come here. Yeah. Say hi.
Hi.
Hey, is that Connor?
Yeah. No, okay. Let's start this over.
Okay.